One intention that I do my best to lead my life with every single day is to hold love and hold compassion in my heart at any given moment throughout the day. But this sort of intention and principle to live my life by is often very challenging, and it's challenging because in times like right now and in other times throughout history, it feels like darkness is winning. It feels like hate is prevailing. It feels like we're all just fighting and we're so divided. And it feels like we can't recognize the love in one another. Just scrolling through like social media and seeing various news stories and just being a witness to all the suffering that exists all across the world, all across the planet. It's hard to hold on to that while also simultaneously holding a vision for love and holding a vision for peace, holding a vision for a future of a world where everyone can just coexist. I think a lot of times about this image that I hold in both my mind's eye and in my heart. And this is an image I think of when I'm meditating. In fact, I held on to this image for a long time in my meditation this morning. I pictured everyone hugging each other. One giant group hug of everyone that exists in the world. Everyone hugging each other and recognizing the imperfections in one another without judgment. Just holding space for one another, holding space for each other's traumas, each other's challenges, each other's hardships, holding space for understanding one another. And it does still feel like sometimes that vision I hold in my heart and that vision that I hold in my mind's eye is not a possibility. And then I remember that's my ego mind speaking. That's my mind trying to make sense and trying to be realistic and trying to process this constant suffering that we're being exposed to on a daily basis, especially now with access to the internet and access to all kinds of suffering happening around the world. And then I also remember that love is the most powerful thing in the world. And I talk a lot about leading with love and being a loving and kind person, but what exactly does love mean? I don't think my definition or my version of love is one that is like a mainstream definition. I don't mean like romantic love. I don't mean like instantly accepting someone's faults or instantly ignoring or bypassing harmful things that people do. I don't think that loving everyone means that we just give a free pass to all the wrongdoings in the world. But when I talk about love and when I talk about loving everyone, I mean that inside every human being is a child who might have had an upbringing that was absent of love. And it's recognizing that At the core of each human being that we come across in our lives is someone who wants to be loved. That's why people act out. That's where hate comes from. That's where division comes from. That's where this illusion of separateness between you and I and us and those who we disagree with come from. And love is recognizing that. That's all it is. It's recognizing that. And then doing something from that is entirely up to you. Taking action from that place of recognition, that's entirely up to you. I don't think that we can continue on with the path that we've been on as a society. It's absolutely not sustainable. War, fighting, hate. How is that sustainable? Because there's always the othering. There's always the other side this, the other side that. And until we can recognize the love in one another, it's just going to repeat that cycle over and over and over and over and over with no resolution. When I talk about love, I mean that sensation that you feel when you're deep in a meditative state, that pure awareness without the distractions of the mind. When I talk about love, I mean that space between our thoughts, that liminal space between our thoughts, where it just feels like this freeing, liberating, an abundant feeling. When I talk about love, I talk about that buzz that we feel in our hearts when we experience sadness, when we experience grief, when we experience or witness the suffering of other human beings. When we feel that excitement, that empowerment, when we feel so much joy. That's what I mean when I say love. When I talk about love, I mean that frequency that you get when you connect with nature, when you touch the trees, when you put your feet on the earth, when you lay in the grass and look up at the clouds passing by, and then you feel the warm sun on your face. And then at nighttime, when you look up at the sky and you have this wonder in your heart, this feeling that, what are we doing here? What is my place in the world? That's what I talk about, or that's what I mean when I talk about love. And I try my best to connect with that feeling every single day, to cultivate more of it. It is so easy to forget that that love is ever present. Even in the darkness, even when hate seems to be just taking over, sometimes it's easy to forget that the love is always present. And I know that love is always present because we always have access to it. We always have access to our hearts. Love isn't something that's out there. Love isn't something that we need to go find from someone else. It actually comes from within. It comes from within our hearts. And I know that love is always present because all it takes is a few minutes each day of taking some deep breaths, focusing on your physical heart center in your body, breathing into that. And the first few times you do this, you might not feel anything. In fact, you probably won't feel anything, especially if you have some sort of challenge or barrier with connecting to that love. But I think that if we want to live an intentional life where we do cultivate more compassion, it starts with us. We can't keep looking in external places for that. We can't keep hoping that someone will come along and change the world. We have to take action on what we can. And in times like right now, it absolutely does feel hopeless, and it does feel helpless. And when we try to think of like practical, realistic solutions, it gets so overwhelming that we're just back to feeling numb again. We're back to having almost like a analysis paralysis of so many different ideas that we have no ideas. Trying to think of all different ways to help, that it becomes so overwhelming that we can't help. And so maybe the solution for right now is to connect with that love in a way that is meaningful to you. What brings you joy? What brings you a buzzing sensation in your heart? For me, it is connecting with the trees and connecting with the earth. It's listening to music. It's moving my body. It's looking up at the sky. It's finding gratitude and finding beauty in my life. And I will continue to do those practices because those practices help me cultivate love. And so just think about, for you, what can you do to cultivate that love in your heart? What can you do that brings you back to that place that you do feel empowered? And not empowered from a place of hate, but empowered from a place of love. And do that more often, if not daily. Make it a daily practice to connect with something that is simple, but something that helps you cultivate love. And when you do start to cultivate that love, what you'll notice is it's easier to hold compassion for more beings. You'll find that it's easier to recognize the human in those beings who you so greatly disagree with. Those beings that you might actually have some hate in your heart for. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we need to bypass and that we need to ignore dangerous or hateful or poor behaviors. But I think that when we can approach these things from a place of love and from a place of compassion, we can recognize that the person that we disagree with very well could be me. What if the roles were switched? We recognize that those who project hate, those who make life more challenging for other people, don't know love. And they do deserve to know love too. Because the longer they don't know love for is the longer that they do keep doing these things that harm others. Take what you will from this. I just really wanted to talk about this today because these things have been weighing really heavily on me lately. They always weigh heavily on me, but I think even more so in the times that we're living in right now. Of course, there are people who will disagree with me and disagree with my beliefs on love and compassion, and to those people I recognize too that we're all on unique paths, and it would be out of place for me to force my beliefs onto you, but I just hope that even if you don't consider it love, I just hope that everyone can do something daily to cultivate some sort of kindness, just some sort of compassion. And I mentioned this in a previous video, but sometimes it does feel like when we look at like the practical steps to take to actually make the world a better place, it does feel so overwhelming. But I believe that us cultivating that love and holding that light in our hearts is oftentimes enough. In fact, it's more than enough for the times where we do feel hopeless and helpless and confused on which next steps to take. Because as a collective, when we hold that love, it raises the vibration of our planet. It brings in and attracts more love. And it's kind of like this cycle I mentioned earlier in the video, a cycle of hate and this hatred going back and forth. But what if we can cultivate a cycle of love? And what if that cultivation just starts with us connecting with that love and projecting it outward into small acts of kindness, into doing our best to at least seek to understand the differences that we feel amongst one another, to at least try to understand why people do the things that they do. Doesn't mean that we allow it or that we necessarily accept it. But if we can understand why they do what they do, I think it's easier to hold a little bit of compassion for them, understanding that that too could be me. I'm imperfect, we're all imperfect, and we recognize these imperfections in one another, and we realize that these imperfections are what make us actually more similar than different. And so my prayer, my intention for you is to take action from a place of groundedness and not take action from a place of hatred. If we want to break the cycle of suffering, we have to do so from a place of love. And that's something I firmly believe. It's a belief that I've cultivated through many, many years, and it's something I will forever hold on to. And I just hope and pray that more people, especially those who have more power than I do, who have more power than most of us, that one day they too can feel that love, and that one day they too can project that love.